Before we get into what Erik Ten Hag said, Rob, earlier today at his press conference, what's the feeling like? What's the mood like in the Northwest right now among Man United fans, given all the things that have happened to them this season?
Doom and gloom, to be honest. The run of results, I think it's 9 defeats now in 17 games to start the season. For a club the size of Man United, and the money that's been spent is appalling. They've got Luton Town at Old Trafford on Saturday, a game that usually you would expect Man United to win comfortably, but the United fans going to Old Trafford on Saturday will be very, very nervous because this is a team that just looks capable of losing every time they step out onto the pitch. That they haven't played well at all this season. You could probably count on one hand the number of times where they've looked convincing this season. Lots of the wins recently have been by the skin of the teeth. At Fulham last weekend, 1-0 in the last minute. Against Copenhagen in the Champions League a couple of weeks ago. Against Brentford, they needed 2 goals in stoppage time. There's just not anything convincing about Man United at the moment. And the fans that follow them are nervous every time they step out and play.
Stevie, the graphic at the bottom of the screen says Manchester United in trouble. How much trouble are they in?
I would suggest that this is about as low as they've been since Ollie took over. I mean, it just feels like one calamity after another, and it feels like going into every game, you're wondering when the calamity is going to appear. I mean, they're in serious trouble. There is no part of the club, never mind just the results. There doesn't seem to be any part of the club that's running smoothly and looks as though it knows what direction it's going in, whether it's the owners, whether it's the board, whether it's the director of football. Certainly the manager doesn't look as though he knows what way he's going. He doesn't know whether he's in fast forward or reverse. And I think ultimately all that is reflected on what's happening on the field. Nobody on the field looks as though they know what they're supposed to be doing. So, yeah, I think to be honest, Rob summed it up, and actually the tone of how he summed it up when he said
I
doom
was
and
thinking
gloom.
that.
When he said doom and gloom, it wasn't it's doom and gloom. It was actually, oh my goodness, this. So yeah, they're in big trouble. And Ten Hag particularly is in big trouble. I mean, I lost to Luton. I don't think they'll lose to Luton. Honestly,
No,
I think
probably not. But we can't say for certain now, though. That's the thing.
I lost to Luton. There is no way they can keep Ten Hag if they lose at home to Luton. There's no way.
Rob, the question has to be why. Now, you've spoken with Erik Ten Hag, 3rd in the table last season, and they won a trophy as well, the League Cup. Not even Stevie, who's got the most Liverpool-tinted glasses, would have predicted this. So why has it happened? When you speak to Ten Hag, what's his reasoning for why this is happening?
As bad as it sounds, I don't think that he knows. And that's one of the problems.
Wow.
You're right that they had a successful season, a relatively successful first season under Ten Hag last year. They spent money in the summer. I think the expectation was that there'd be some kind of progress. They would kick on somehow. They're probably not ready to challenge Arsenal and Man City for the Premier League title, but the expectation was that they were going to take another step forward. In reality, they've probably taken about 5 steps back. The biggest issue, the biggest change for me is the way that they've defended. They struggled to score goals last season, and they are struggling to score goals again. Last season, they found a way to defend. They had more Premier League clean sheets last season than anyone else. And this year, they just look like a team that doesn't know how to defend at all. They concede lots of goals. I think it's 30 in 17 games already this season, which is obviously around about 2 a game, which is far too many for a big side. Not only that, they concede lots of goals in a short space of time. Against Copenhagen on Wednesday, it was 2 in 4 minutes to lose the game at the end. Against Newcastle in the Carabao Cup, it was 2 in 7 minutes. There have been instances again, earlier in the season at Bayern, at Arsenal, against Forest at home. These situations where they collapse and concede more than 1 goal in a very, very short space of time. Obviously injuries haven't helped at all, and Ten Hag has made a point of saying that he hasn't been able to pick his starting back 5. He's had injuries to Martinez, to Luke Shaw, who have barely played this season. He's got a new goalkeeper in Andre Onana. The problem is that often these sound like excuses, and United have still got a very, very good squad. They've got a deep squad full of very, very good players, and the drop-off in form really is inexplicable. The way that they are struggling to defend compared to how they were doing it last year is unbelievable. And when you can't defend, I mean, Stevie will know better than anyone, as a former defender. When you can't defend, there's no point really in anything else. If you're conceding goals and shipping goals at that rate, it's an absolute disaster. You just don't win games.
How much of this is on Ten Hag, Stevie, and how much of it is on bad luck, bad fortune with the injuries to Luke Shaw, with the injuries to Lisandro Martinez, both of them likely to be out for the rest of the year, and recruitment clearly hasn't been good enough. So does Ten Hag take all the blame here for the situation they're in, or are there mitigating circumstances, including behind the scenes where we know about the Glazers and obviously the potential new input coming in soon? Is it all of this that combines, or is it mostly Ten Hag?
Well, to Rob's point about losing goals, he's absolutely right. It affects everybody. It even affects the centre forward, because when you're Hoyland and you're running your guts out like this kid does, and every time you seem to take a step forward by putting the ball in the back of the net, and you look down the other end and the ball's hitting your own net, it takes the stuffing out of everybody. So yeah, I mean, when you lose goals, it affects the whole team, not just defenders. But at the end of the day, listen, the coach has to take the majority of the blame. Yes, you can blame individual players for for their attitude or for their mistakes, but ultimately, it's the coach's job to get his players in a mental state to defend properly, whether it be through good organisation or whether it be man management or working with them as a group. At the end of the day, that's your job as a coach. You have to organise, and particularly your back line. Because when you keep clean sheets, like Man United did last year, all they need is somebody to be informed, like Rashford was. Now, I am not shocked that Rashford isn't doing this year what he did last year, because what he did in a 6-month spell last year was completely against everything he'd done probably for the previous 2 years. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't convinced he was going to do it again. And the fact that he's not doing it, again, isn't a shock. But the fact that they're shipping in goals means that they're losing games and not coming out the other side. But really, you got to look at Ten Hag. I mean, the organisation isn't there, which seems incredible. They've all got 25 coaches. They've got videos. They've got analysts. They've got everything you need to organise and figure out things. They keep telling us they've got all these people because we go into minute details. Well, where's the minute details in this Manchester United back line? Because it is an absolute shambles. And for all the experience Varane has and for all the experience Maguire has, somehow they've left their brains in the dressing room. They're defending like schoolboys. I mean, they're standing on the top of the 6-yard, the fourth goal in particular. They're standing on top of the 6-yard box for a ball coming in. I mean, it's madness. It's just not the way you defend. You've got to try and clear your box, give the goalie a chance. I mean, simple things. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out the basics of football. Coaches from 12-year-old kids up to professionals are doing this week in and week out. So how is Manchester United such a shambles? It really is baffling. It's totally baffling.
Rob, Stevie says he just can't see Luton winning at Old Trafford. But what if they do? Would that be it for Erik Ten Hag?
You would have to think that it would be close. There's absolutely no appetite at the moment at Man United to sack him. There's no succession plan in place. They desperately want it to work out for Ten Hag. The problem is that once results get away from you, then you can't. There's no hiding place from that. You can have, with the best will in the world, you can talk about plans and long-term planning and everything. If you're losing week after week, Stevie's right. The manager is the guy that has to pay the price and he has to go. The interesting thing about this situation, you've mentioned it before, is that at some point over the next 2 weeks, we expect Sir Jim Radcliffe to have a 25% stake in Man United. Now, as part of that deal, he would quite like to have control or at least influence over the sporting side of the business. And obviously the key guy on the football side of the club is the manager. Now, a couple of weeks ago, the noises coming out from Sir Jim Radcliffe's camp was that they would back Erik Ten Hag. They wanted to have him as the first guy of this new era, that they knew the fans were very supportive of him. But obviously with every defeat, that confidence, whether it's with Sir Jim Radcliffe or the fans, erodes a little bit. And it has eroded. You know, the optimism that fans had around Ten Hag and the club over the summer has disappeared to some extent. And so when you get a situation like a game against Luton at Old Trafford, you know, a team that they should be beating 9 times out of 10, if that game goes the wrong way and they were to lose that, then everyone at the club has got a big decision to make, because ultimately it can't carry on. And as I say, United, you know, haven't really got any kind of appetite to sack Ten Hag. They really, really don't want to. But you cannot have a situation where you continue to lose. And we saw the same situation with Jose Mourinho and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. They were both sacked mid-season around about sort of November, December time, because results just spiraled out of control. And the one thing that the club could do, that the biggest change that they could make, was the manager. And Erik Ten Hag is a smart guy. You know, he thinks that he's got the backing of the club, but he also knows that you just cannot carry on losing games. And for Luton to go to Old Trafford and win, given what's gone before them this season, you know, United would face a massive, massive decision there.
Interesting comments there, Stevie, from Rob, saying there isn't really a succession plan in place because they didn't feel that they needed one. They want to put all their eggs in the one basket with Ten Hag, and hopefully he can turn things around. But I want to take a look at this full screen with the odds on a potential replacement for Erik Ten Hag. And certainly one of the favourites up there is Zinedine Zidane, along with Graham Potter. Look, the only reason you're on this is because Dan Thomas is a little rascal and asked Paddy Power for odds on what it would be for you to take over. So assuming it's not going to be you, any of those names float your boat?
I think Nagelsmann and De Zerbi are the two that stick out. I don't think there's any way Zidane's taking the job in a million years. Not happening. Potter, I mean, considering what happened to Chelsea, although a lot of it certainly was out with his, you know, you couldn't really point the finger that much, in my opinion, at him. But I still think it's taking a little chunk away of how we think about him. So Nagelsmann and De Zerbi for me would be the two. You know, Nagelsmann, you know, Rob's talking about, you know, there's no succession plan and no look to the future. I mean, Nagelsmann probably would be the look to the future. De Zerbi, on the other hand, I think would be, for now, I think he's the type of character that probably would get a reaction from this group of players. So, yeah, those two. If I'm United and I've got a choice, I'd probably go with De Zerbi, just because of the experiences. Even though he's only been in the Premier League a short time, he pretty much knows it inside out. He knows what's needed to win. He certainly doesn't look like a shrinking violet. He's quite confident, shall we say. So I think he's got the temperament to walk into Manchester United and straight away certainly make an attitude adjustment, because right now there doesn't seem to be a particularly good attitude at United. So, yeah, De Zerbi first and then maybe Nagelsmann second.
Just finally, a quick one for you, Rob, before we move on to Chelsea against Manchester City on Sunday and hear from both managers and get your thoughts on it as well. In all your research about Jim Radcliffe with his potential investment coming in, and that will hopefully be done from a United perspective over the next few weeks, has there been anything about who he might fancy as a manager if it isn't Erik Ten Hag?
Well, as I say, I mean, the noises coming out of his camp at least a couple of weeks ago were that they were going to give Erik Ten Hag a chance, and you know, they supported him in that role. The interesting one on that list is Graham Potter. Obviously, he's not got a job, hasn't worked since Chelsea. But there was a suggestion over the summer that Sir Jim Radcliffe, who obviously owns a French club, Nice, had tried to get Potter involved there in the summer. So you'd have to assume that if that's the case, that he's quite a big fan of Graham Potter, and that if there was a situation where he was in charge of the football side of the business at Man United and there was a vacancy for a new manager, that again, Potter would be one of the names in the frame for that. Again, you know, Stevie's right. His time at Chelsea didn't go particularly well. Obviously, he built up a lot of credit with what he did at Brighton. So, you know, would United fans be particularly happy with Graham Potter coming in after what happened at Chelsea? You know, I'm not sure, especially, again, the interesting thing about this was if they were to make a change mid-season, would United go with a permanent manager who was there for the long term, or would they do something short term? In the past, when they've sacked managers mid-season, they've looked for a short-term interim to try and buy themselves some time to then make the right appointment later down the line. And one of the names in the frame that has been mentioned is Lopetegui, who's obviously not worked since he left Wolves, but was someone that United interviewed an awful lot when they were hiring Ten Hag. So United know everything about Lopetegui. He stayed in England after the Wolves job. He is available. I would imagine that he would be in and around the conversation if there was a vacancy at United as well.